Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're so excited about our Compassion Arts Festival. I'm Lisa Levinson with In Defense of Animals, and it's my pleasure to host the Speaker Roundtable Learning from Animals, a reflection on the third trust, open our minds in humility to animals and learn from them. So this is a very exciting opportunity to learn from some of our very special speakers tonight. First of all, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. As I mentioned, my name is Lisa Levinson. I work with In Defense of Animals. I'm the campaigns director there, and I also focus on wild animal issues. In addition, I help with the Sustainable Activism campaign, and we provide emotional and spiritual tools for animal activists. We also have an interfaith vegan coalition. So these are some of the projects that I've been involved with personally myself. So now I'm very delighted to introduce our speakers today. We have, to start with, we're going to begin with Mark Beckhoff, who's an esteemed guest and author and activist, and I'm just so delighted that he can join us today. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Lisa, and everyone else. Thanks for having me. Sorry, 1 second. Let me mute me for a second. Great. Well, I'm flattered and honored and pleased that you're using Jane Goodall and my book as a guide for this wonderful gathering. I'm not sure what else to say. I reread a chunk of the book and I reread The Third Trust and I went, oh, wow, not bad. So that was really good. I don't have a lot to say. I'm just going to throw out just a couple little snippets because I'm hoping people will read the book and then we'll have a discussion about it. But, basically, I remember talking to Jane a lot. We were in constant contact writing this book, and it was before she got on email. So we spent a lot of time faxing and on the phone. And when she finally got on email, it was a real relief because I kept saying, Jane, I need an attachment for the book. And I think at one point she said, a watt, but I knew she knew what it was. So, from my point of view, what we can learn from other animals and, show a lot of humility is that they're sentient beings. I mean, I know there are some animals who people think are non-sentient, but I think sentience is everywhere. And that I call it an inconvenient truth for a lot of people who choose to ignore this. And I use the word choose because, a lot of people choose to do the things that they do and they'll say, oh, I had to do it. And I would say, no, you don't have to do it. You don't have to harm other animals. You must want to. Oh, no, I don't want to, but I have to. And then that, of course, gets into a discourse that's useless to pursue because they try to sort of throw off the responsibility for the harm they cause to other animals to either an existing paradigm of science or blaming others. It's really easy to blame others. But, the fact of the matter is that people are shocked when I tell them a bit about the Animal Welfare Act in the United States of America that in its latest iteration redefined the word animal to exclude rats, mice, birds, fishes, and invertebrates. So they actually redefined the word animals to exclude the very animals who are used by the millions and billions throughout the world in research. Okay. That's not showing a lot of humility. That's just showing pure dumbness. I mean, the people who did this are dumb. I know we're not supposed to use words like that, but I have 8-year-old kids ask me, well, if they're not animals, what are they? And I'll always say, no, you mean who are they, not what are they? But, just redefining the word animals to exclude lab animals, to me, is just a ridiculous move. The other thing that I remember we talked about a lot, and I'm not saying Jane agrees with everything I'm saying, and I don't mean that in any way other than, we can disagree about things and still write, but it led me to think about the failures of animal welfare. mean, animal welfare allows for horrific harm to be done to animals. It's really welfare in the name of humans. And people do this little calculus that, well, if the costs, to the animals are, less than the benefits to the humans, the animals don't really much if at all benefit from the research, then we can do what we want to do. And in our book, The Animal's Agenda, Jessica and I developed the science of animal well-being, in which the life of every single individual matters, not from an instrumental value of what they can do for us, but rather because they have intrinsic or inherent value. And for some of you who have read about compassionate conservation, you'll already know that that's one of the basic tenets, is that do no harm and the life of every individual matters. So in animal welfare science, people will say the life matters, but it doesn't, because animal welfareists working in conservation think it's perfectly okay to go kill 10,000 rats because there's 1 million. They play the numbers game. And that's where welfare really fails a lot of animals, but it also fails animals in the lab, if you will. A few weeks ago, I received an email from a middle school student, and she wrote, quote, are you tired of asking people to treat other animals and our planet with respect and compassion? And she wasn't being nasty. And I said, I am tired of asking people to do this. I mean, in the last month, I've been asked to write or rewrite some things I've written in the past. And I know we're all faced with this. And I just said, no, if you want to know how I feel about something, just read what I've written. I have nothing new to say, and I'd rather put my efforts to action. So that's another way that we can really serve animals and learn from them, is they're depending on us to do something. People could write philosophical treatises that are wonderful to read, but in my eyes, they don't do enough on the ground. So another way that I think we can be activists and open our minds and our hearts to other animals is following what I call the 13 P's of rewilding. In my book, Rewilding Our Hearts, there was 8 of them. And every time I talk about them, somebody adds to them. So now I've got a baker's dozen. And it's being proactive, positive, persistent, patient, peaceful, practical, powerful, passionate, playful, present, principled, proud, and polite. And the reason I started developing these was, I think the best way to get things done for animals is you can engage your opponents, and then at some point just decide when somebody is not going to change, and just say, fine, I agree to disagree, let's move on, because there's so many people out there who are going to just waste your time and energy. So it's kind of like picking your battles. And I think that if we're polite to people, it's also a disarming type of a move. I haven't for the last year and a half taught at the local jail, but I've taught there for almost 20 years as part of Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots program. And you learn very quickly to disarm people, because when they get in your face, and they can be dangerous, you don't want to be in that situation. So one way to disarm them is really to be nice, listen to them, and then politely agree to disagree. So I'll end off by just saying, I've been working I coined a word that I'm calling radvocate. And it's a combination of radical and advocate, because I'm tired of people in our camp being called the radicals. The norm is that it's perfectly okay to harm and kill other animals. And really the norm should be that killing is off the table, that we're not allowed to do this anymore. We're not allowed to incarcerate animals in jail cells and zoos. And we're not allowed to do the things that happen in entertainment and in many, many laboratories. So my hope, and I remember talking to Jane about this, is when we reflect on who animals are and we show humility, that we choose actively to care and act on behalf of other animals. And a lot of the hope that I have lies with youngsters. They're going to inherit the world that we we choose to leave for them. People don't like that. When I talk to people and I say, well, you chose to do that, there's no way out. I mean, I have chosen to be with you. I can't blame somebody for saying, well, yeah, I had to do it because Lisa told me if I didn't do it, I was a bad boy or something like that. So, you know, and the last thing is we do have choices and we are responsible for what we choose to do, that each and every individual has to take responsibility. So thank you. And we can roll on to the next person.
Well, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it. And I love your word. I don't know if you coined that term about the radical ratificism, but it's a good one.
I did. And somebody already used it, and I got very upset with her. And I told her she was going to have to buy me a case of my favorite wine. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't find it anywhere. And it came to me when I was writing. But it also came to me when people just, you know, we've all been blown off. Oh, you're just crazy left-wing radicals. We go, why? Because we don't want to harm other animals in the world. So it's basically normalizing what we do rather than normalizing harm to other animals. Yeah, and killing them. Yeah.
Well, it's a word that deserves to be in the lexicon. So thank you for bringing it to us.
I will write something on it.
Good. That's an inspiration. So now I think we'll introduce one of our other speakers today. It's Allison Argo. She's a multiple National Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, director, writer, editor, and producer of documentaries for deepening the understanding of and respect for all animals. So Allison, we'd love to hear a bit about you and your work. You may need to unmute, possibly.
Here we are. Hi, thanks so much for having me and for hosting this. And Ellie, thank you for the endless work that you put into this program. It's really wonderful and it's exciting to see it grow every year. And I hope it grows bigger and bigger because I think compassion and arts is just such an important and obvious fit. And so I'm thrilled to be an artist and an activist. So we were asked to, from a personal viewpoint, standpoint, talk about what we've learned from animals personally. And I'm really glad that that question was asked because I learn from animals every day, every film that I make, but I hadn't really dug into it on a personal level. And it made me so grateful. I have gained so much. I'm a different person. And I really didn't have much exposure to non-human animals when I was a kid. I grew up in the arts, theater specifically, and I went ahead into that career. And somehow at around 30-ish, in my very early 30s, gorillas suddenly appeared on my radar. I can't tell you why, but I just became impassioned and just started reading and watching anything that I could get my hands on. And the more I learned, the more I was just totally taken by them, but also so concerned about their welfare. Diane Fossey was, reporting from the wild with her findings, and I did a lot of travel through my work. And so I'd visit zoos and I'd see the conditions that we kept the gorillas that we took out of the wild in. And I was really concerned about their welfare. And I'd never made a film, but it seemed like the best way that I could speak out for them was to figure out how to make a film. So I'm going to try to share my screen and play a little clip that I cobbled together for my very first film. This was 30 years ago. And this is Ivan the gorilla living in a shopping mall in Tacoma, Washington, where it was perfectly legal to keep a full-grown silverback gorilla.
At the B&I shopping center, amidst cash registers and shopping carts, inside 2 concrete rooms and a trailer just beyond the sporting goods, lives a 400-pound silverback gorilla named Ivan.
We can't see the
Ivan has
screen.
been at the B&I for
Oh,
24 years.
Oh, let me start. Geez, thank you for
Sorry,
speaking.
sorry. No, that's okay.
No, I just didn't. I am so sorry. Here we go.
No, that's all right.
Share. Now. Okay, I'll have this down by the time my talk is over. Okay,
That's great.
so this is the lovely
At the
BNI.
B&I shopping center, amidst cash registers and shopping carts, inside 2 concrete rooms and a trailer just beyond the sporting goods, lives a 400-pound silverback gorilla named Ivan. Ivan has been at the B&I for 24 years. A victim of circumstance, Ivan lives out his solitary days at the B&I, a sad reminder of a less enlightened era when gorillas were seen as nothing more than exotic attractions.
So Ivan and the other gorillas in that film, the other gorillas I encountered, totally changed my life as a result of actually a lot of hard work on the part of IDA and local people. The store was picketed, and the film really helped ignite a battle to get him out of there. And eventually, I mean, within short order, actually, the store went bankrupt. Ivan ended up in the hands of the court, and the film ended up airing on National Geographic, and together we created a gorilla relocation fund, and the donations just poured in after the show aired, and the outrage. And Ivan was moved to Zoo Atlanta, which was a zoo, but it had a naturalistic environment. He was able to be with other gorillas for the first time in 30 years, touched the grass, saw the sky for the first time in about 30 years, which is absolutely phenomenal that we would allow that was okay to keep a silverback gorilla in those conditions, alone in isolation. It still blows my mind today. But when I made that film, basically Ivan helped me find my voice, and he helped me find a direction for my life. I was just totally smitten with documentaries because I'd seen how it could change the life for the better. And so I went on to make more documentaries and try to change the direction of life for other non-humans. But he definitely helped me find my voice. So I went on to make other films, and I also found another thing that animals have taught me. I think growing up in the theater, this is what occurred to me when I was thinking about this assignment, if you will, is that I was just taught to be on. I was on stage by the age of, carried on at 2 and had a walking, talking role at 4. And I think the first time that I learned to just totally relax and lose myself was in the presence of non-human animals, when I would just sit and be with gorillas, or later other animals. And it was the greatest gift to learn that and to experience that. And sometimes when I get stressed out, if I can't sleep at night, for instance, I will picture myself in a pile of pigs. I mean, they always sleep all together if they live in a herd. There's never a pig off alone. And I just think of myself there with my fellow pigs, and my blood pressure goes down, and it's just a mental exercise, but they've taught me and given me so much. And, I pray that I can, through my films, give that and open that door for other people. I want to show another clip, which is from another film that I made, obviously. And it is about chimpanzees. And there was a gentleman named Pat Ring who in Canada lived next door to a sanctuary. He sold half of his land to this chimpanzee sanctuary, and the sanctuary ended up taking in former laboratory chimps that had been infected with HIV. And he was really upset and furious. But this is the evolution that he went through, and I think it's really inspiring.
Yeah, good. Where is he? Come on, swelling. Come down here. Come on, baby. Give me a kiss. I want a big one. Give me a big kiss. Oh.
Here we have this cowboy guy telling me not to take HIV positive chimps because of his fear of AIDS. And now I see him standing there kissing this HIV positive adult male chimpanzee. Tom's the one who changed his mind.
Tom has an old foot injury from Lemsip that still needs care.
Me totos. Put him on.
It's an amazing exchange of trust that Tom lets Pat treat him. Normally, chimps have to be anesthetized for any kind of medical procedure.
We just kind of hit it off. Now give me a hand. Give me a hand. No, not just put the hand. Right here. We've been best buds ever since. The other hand. He loves me and I love him, and it's, I can't really tell you the reason. I have no idea. I wanted no part of the HIV infected chimps. I thought we were going to be all end up with AIDS. Now there's nothing I wouldn't do for Tommy. There's no way I could receive unless it was blood-to-blood contact. And if there is a procedure, we'll take precautions and there's no danger at all. I used to be kind of a redneck, I guess, but since I've been with the chimps, it's totally different. They've taught me, and I've changed immensely. I mean, it's unbelievable the way I've changed with my attitude towards people, not just chimps. They are so forgiving that they have hearts bigger than ours. There's no way I could forgive like they forgive. And we're supposed to be human and smarter. I don't know who's smarter. Hey, Tommy.
So I think it's so powerful to hear that man's perspective. He's a truck driver. He's, as he calls himself a redneck. And for a viewer who might actually identify with this gentleman, to be able to hear him say those words and relate to that chimpanzee, my God, if he can love a chimpanzee, maybe I can love a chimpanzee too. So I think that's another example of how, the potential power of films. We give the audience a window into these lives, and it can be really, really powerful. I wanted to show another clip. Actually, I did have a clip that I was going to show, but I think we might run out of time. So later, if we want to, we can. But this is actually not one of my films, but I just think it is so effective and reaches just a totally different audience. It's had how many views? It's had it's had 15 million views on Facebook. So it's been watched by a lot of people. Oops, oh my God, I almost left the meeting. Cancel. Holy cow. Well, being my own techie is not perfect. Okay, here we go. So this is just, I think, so clever. And
so I came in here because they told me this is a gourmet bacon taste test. If you're fucking with me, I'm gonna be really upset. Everyone loves bacon.
So I can be asked to explain why I like chocolate, because it's delicious.
Anything with grease and fat is gonna be good.
It's good with eggs, it's good on a sandwich, good with chicken.
I could live without having bacon, but it wouldn't be very much fun.
I never even thought about a world without bacon. And we're having bacon in the morning. What a Tuesday. Oh my God, she's so bitter! Oh no! Oh no!
Oh God, okay, now I'm never gonna have bacon ever again.
It's a tiny little pig. He's so big.
I mean, he does look delicious. Let's be honest.
No, what you doing now? Where you go? Oh, he's shy. He's on camera shy.
I had bacon a few days ago. I don't want to say it too loud.
What are you thinking about?
Are my beliefs that fragile that one little cute thing in my arm is going to just change everything I know? Kinda, yeah.
Bacon or steak. We look at those things as pieces of meat on our plate and not something that wants to snuggle in your arms.
How could you want to eat this little guy? Look how cute he is. Look at that face. Look at that face. I gotta say, of all the animals that pooped on me, that was probably the most pleasant.
So I know that in some ways that's very offensive, but I mean, it's clever. I believe that, you know, we all are different artists. We all, you know, some of us write, some of us paint, some of us sing, and some of us actually run sanctuaries, which is so powerful because I bet you've seen people come to your sanctuary and see a piglet for the first time or a pig and say, oh my God, I had no idea that they were so intelligent or adorable. I think we need voices from every direction, telling stories in a million trillion different ways. And so I really appreciate that last piece. It's something I never would have thought of making myself, but I think it's really, you know, in its own way, it's powerful. And if you read the comments, again, on Facebook, it had like 15 million plus views, and the comments are great. Like, I will never eat pork again, or pig. You know, we all know that opening hearts and minds to animals is essential, but how to do it is the question, and how to reach the audience. That's my biggest frustration is, or the biggest hurdle. You know, finding money to make a film is really difficult. But even if you do manage to do that and you make your film, getting the film out there, especially with the changing landscape of distribution, is so hard. And so that's, to me, the greatest challenge, and the hurdle just seems to keep, the hurdles get higher and higher right now. But, you know, I think we're getting there. The thing that really I question is, a lot of people really feel that they are animal lovers, dogs and cat lovers. I mean, they say, oh my God, I love animals. I would do anything for animals. And then they go to the grocery store and they buy a packet of meat. And it's that disconnect that perplexes me. It's, how do I reach that audience and help them connect the dots that a cow is also sentient, a fish is sentient. So that's my personal, I hope we get into that a little bit later in the roundtable, but anyway, sorry, a little disjointed, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Wow. Well, thank you, Allison. Those film clips were so powerful, and I can see that it definitely speaks to the power of film and how potent it is. I mean, just in those few moments, I was crying, I was laughing, I was, you know, with you and with the animals. So I do think that your mode of choice to educate people is really important for this day and age, which is so much based on our the visuology, I guess you could call it, looking at everything and how that impacts the eyes that we see with, and our souls that are windows the eyes are windows to our souls. So thank you for that. Yes, and it's my pleasure to continue introducing you to our wonderful speakers. And we also have today, we have Shailene Shaw, and Shailene is a co-founder of 11 Arms Animal Sanctuary near Denver, Colorado, with his wife Shilipi and young boys Arav and Avi. The sanctuary provides a safe haven for rescued animals while spreading the values of nonviolence and compassion. Hey, Charlene, how are you today?
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. And Ellie, thank you for this opportunity and such an incredible honor to be here with all of these amazing co-panelists. So I wanted to share a couple of stories of where I started to learn from animals. We started a sanctuary 6 years ago, but if you had told me 6.5 years ago that you're about to start a sanctuary, I would not have believed you. And that happened because about 7 years ago, we first adopted our first animals in our life. I never had pets growing up, but when we adopted our first animal, it was a horse. And that's because growing up, I loved riding horses in India. And then we had this opportunity to start riding here in the US about 7 years ago, and then we ended up adopting a horse. And when we adopted Holly, it was for the first time that I actually saw the horse for who she is instead of what I wanted from her. And in those moments that I would spend with her, I could see her as an individual and see her desires, her wants, her likes and dislikes, and just her as an individual, getting to know her really started opening up other thoughts of, well, what is my relationship with her, and what is it that I'm doing when I ask her to ride, and is that something that she really wants or doesn't want? So all of these thoughts and questions started to come, and ultimately I decided to stop riding, and instead started to learn more about the plight of horses. And in conversation in our family with Shilpi, as to be quite honest, Shilpi was telling me to stop riding even before we adopted Holly, because I think she was so much ahead in just understanding those truths. But it took Holly to help me see that. And then as we were rescuing horses and we rescued Belle from the slaughter auction, and we saw hundreds of other farm animals there with these emotions right on their faces of just how terrified they were, and how they were being kicked and prodded into the auction floor. All we could do was just pray. If we had land, we could have saved some more of those individuals. Luckily, that very night, we get a phone call out of the blue that there's 23 acres for lease 2 miles from our house. So the next day we signed the lease and start the sanctuary. But when we started the sanctuary and we were thinking about, okay, how do we really help animals? How do we, we can only rescue a few, so how do we really do this? And the thoughts would come that, okay, we should educate people. We need to tell them that animals are amazing, that stop eating them, and we should educate them about a vegan diet. But then this one time, after we'd rescued 2 pigs, Felix and Franklin, and we had a group of folks who came to volunteer and spend time with Franklin, especially. He was just an amazing individual that you would see him and you would fall in love with him in the first, as soon as you saw him. And this little girl, she must have been maybe 8 or 10, and she sat down with Franklin, rubbed his belly, and spent probably less than 3 minutes with him. But when she got up from that experience, she turned to her mom and said, "Mom, I don't ever want to eat bacon again." And just like the video that we saw with Allison, from Allison, like that connection, that being in the presence of these beautiful individuals does so much. And that taught me about kind of the humbleness of, it's not, yes, we can provide information to people, but they need to be inspired to change. And we aren't the ones to inspire them. The animals themselves inspire them. So a lot of the programming that we do at Love and Arms is really about creating that space where people can connect with these individuals from these different species and really get to know who they are. And that makes all the difference in the world. So thank you again for inviting me to be a part of this. I'll turn it back to you, Lisa.
Oh, thank you, Charlene. These stories of that connection and those moments, those aha moments are so, so powerful, not only for the individuals, but also for animal advocates, because it actually lightens our soul. It really does bring hope. So thank you for sharing that. And now I'd like to introduce Reverend Sarah Bowen, who is an animal chaplain and interfaith educator and spirituality writer, also the co-founder of the Compassion Consortium. Hey, Sarah.
Hi there. Thank you, Lisa and Ellie, and I'm just delighted to be here with all of you. As Lisa mentioned, I'm an animal chaplain, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is, because people often kind of scratch their head a little bit about what does that actually mean? But I'm going to do that through this lens tonight of learning through animals and learning in humility through animals. And so I want to start by telling you I was a really odd kid. And so the way that I learned from animals, it may sound a little strange, but I learned from flattened fauna. So I was this little kid with a house full of cats who loved them and pet them, and they were part of our family. But I would walk home from school and I would see these little smashed chipmunks and squirrels and little folks that pulled on my heart. And I was 6, 7 years old walking with my lunchbox. And so I would open my lunchbox up, put them in, take them home, give them a burial. Now, my father was a minister, so I was used to funeral homes. I was used to dealing with bodies when the life had left them. And so, the transformation that really happened for me was out of this curiosity about how do we treat animals when they've passed? And so as I got more and more curious about that, I ended up attending seminary. I did a lot of animal advocacy and work with people on how do you survive animal loss. So a part of my work is personal, is working with people around, 90% of people who lose a companion animal report that is a difficult event. 50% of those folks have problems with eating or work or just their daily living. And that ends up being a doorway for some of the conversations that we're talking about today. So does species extinction and wildlife loss. So I want to toss one little tidbit out to you here about roadkill, since I started there, which is that about 100 people are killed every day on the roads in the US, which is terrible and awful and something we need to work on. And 1 million animals are killed every day in the US alone on roads. That's 400 million a year. So this is another place to have a conversation with people about animal advocacy and about helping animal lives. So beyond roadkill, beyond teaching about spirituality, beyond helping people with conversations about pets, what I really like to do is work with people on animal spirituality. And so people say, well, why animal spirituality? Spirituality is something that's often left out of conversations about animals. And yet, 89% of humans consider themselves spiritual. 50% of them belong to a religious community or a spiritual community or a yoga center or a meditation place or wherever we go to get whatever we're getting. And 75% of folks who were surveyed in the recent 2020 survey believe in some sort of transcendent type of higher power of some sort, whether it's God or it's energy or it's consciousness, or I like to call it the Force because I have a little bit of a Star Wars issue. But whatever, kind of wording that we're using there. And this last point is, I think, the most important for our conversation today. 88% of humans surveyed engage in a spiritual practice at least once a week. So in addition to conversations about how we're similar to other animals, who's sentient, who has minds, who can feel, who's empathetic, all of these really great topics that we've talked about tonight and that many of us have written about and done films about and all of this. What might happen if we considered animal spirituality? Is that another doorway? Are we less likely to eat someone or hurt someone or exploit someone if we know that they have an inner life similar to what we feel, or perhaps different than what we feel, but some sort of transcendent feel, some sort of meditative state, some sort of connection to something greater than themselves, all of those words that we use around spirituality. So there's 3 ways that I suggest that we address that and then we look into it. The first is animal divina. And this is looking back at our sacred texts, looking back at the stories that have been told, and realizing that 0.01% of life on this planet is human. And there's a lot of stories about other beings that we can learn from that might help open our hearts. When we can educate people on those sacred texts, the stories, not the ethics piece, but the stories of the animals who are present there, that's a way to open the heart. I also have a book, Sacred Sendoffs, that's coming out that has some of that information. So I'm going to skip to the next one, which is really where I want to focus, which is interspecies practices. So first off, I hope all of you will come at some point to the Compassion Consortium, the 4th Sunday of every month, where we, some of the panelists have been there and joined me. And I hope some of you do as well, where we spend time doing this, not talking about this, but actually doing it. We meditate with cows. We chant shalom with sheep. And we attempt to do movement practices with goats. And here's where I want to talk about humility. Because if you'd like to be humble, try to do moving meditation with goats. They have a lot of other things on their mind. And so they really point out to us how rigid we may be in our definitions of spirituality or the ways we try to connect. Now, at the Compassion Consortium, of course, we're really careful about our ethics of what we're doing. So Erica gets to go out to all of these wonderful sanctuaries and do the practices, and then we share them and we do them with her on video. So perhaps we'll get over to Love and Arms soon and get some spiritual practices from there. But what we have found is when people have these type of interactions, and these are nonverbal, these are often meditative or mindful, or when we slip into that space that Jane talks about when she talks about the chimps at the waterfall, or these different kind of states. And I know Mark has written about this as well, but these ways that we can engage in a feeling, a shared feeling with another species. When we do that to open our hearts and open our minds, we also need to keep a couple things in mind. And this is the framework that I have for interspecies spirituality. Honor the individual experience. We've heard this tonight as well, that individuals, right? What they have in mind, what we have in mind, we need to be able to be flexible. Recognize the capacity for and the presence of all divine connections. Connections between humans and humans, humans and animals, animals and the divine, humans and the divine, all of this, all of these different type of connections that we can have. And most importantly, consider boundaries. Just like the goats who like to push Erica around because they have a different idea of how we should meditate, or the sheep that decide when you're in the perfect lotus position that they'd rather have a pat. We need to be flexible and share these moments rather than it being about humans doing something in the presence of other beings. And I can't say that enough, because we see a lot of that where, we're going to do such and such around animals as opposed to have a connection with them. So one of the things we do is we educate communities, spiritual communities, religious communities, churches, synagogues, mosques, meditation centers on how can you be more interspecies inclusive. And I don't have time to go through all of these today, but they make sense, right? We need to default to plant-based food at our gatherings. We We need to include animals in our liturgies, talk about the intersectionality of animal issues with other calls for social justice, this type of work, so that we can be inspired by and we can shift whatever it is that we have that's holding us in these kind of locked frameworks about what animals might be for. So the last thing, and you probably get a tip off from the beginning. Do you remember that I told you about the chipmunks in my lunchbox? I should share that I went through probably 20 lunchboxes in elementary school because of my desire to do this and to take care of animals, is to consider sacred send-offs. You know, we often talk about preserving animal life, and that's really important. And a lot of the work that we're involved in advocacy is to do so. And at the same time, how do we treat those bodies, those beings when they pass? And I call that sacred send-offs. And my new book in April has all sorts of ideas from what do we do about animal astronauts, about lab mice, about folks that perish in forest fires, about folks who are killed or exterminated, all of this. How do we honor these lives? And that's another doorway for people, because how we treat animals at their death says a lot about how we value their lives. So if we can get people to start engaging in these types of memorials and rituals, whether it's at home for your own animal companions or it's on this broader scale, that's another doorway. So I'll just close by saying that if you would like to learn more about animal spirituality, if you'd like to get inspired by flattened fauna, if this sounds a little odd to you, that's good. It is a little odd, and I'd like to talk more with you about it and how we can have some humility about that end as well. So I've got a workshop and some retreats and trainings and things coming up, and please join us at the Compassion Consortium. Lisa, Ellie, thank you so much for this time to share about this passionate topic, opening our hearts, learning from animals, and remembering to be humble, especially when meditating with goats.
Oh, that is amazing. Well, so many interesting topics that you brought up for us to think about. I love the animal spirituality, and I know how you have an affection for squirrels, and I definitely remember many moons ago in Philadelphia seeing a squirrel, like really just looking at the sunset, and I thought, gee, this animal is not rushing around. This animal is really in a silent reflection and maybe a spiritual moment. And I think that if we pay attention, we may notice more of those in our animal neighbors. So thank you, Sarah, for bringing this to our attention. So now I would like to actually invite Mark back for a moment, because he is intimately familiar with the Third Trust, and I thought he might share a little bit. And before he does, I'd like to share a little bit more about him. So for those of you who know Mark as an incredible animal advocate, he also is a professor emeritus of ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of Colorado, and the author of many 30 or more acclaimed books on animal studies, animal behavior, animal emotions, and more. So, Mark, would you be willing to share a few words on the Third Trust with us? Oop, you might have to unmute first.
Okay, I said I'm still recovering from those amazing presentations. The picture of the gorilla in the shopping mall breaks my heart. And I mean, yeah. And the picture of the truck driver at the chimp sanctuary. So it shows that contact with other animals is really important. I mean, I don't really have a lot more to say, but you know, when people meet these animals up close and personal, they realize that, yeah, they're animals. And, you know, I've had people turn around and say, God, they're just like us. And I would say, well, we're just like them. I mean, you know, the whole Darwinian principle of evolutionary continuity. But, there were some guiding questions, and I found these to be really useful. One was concerning obstacles, for people to interact with or to behave in some humble way with non-humans. The obstacles really, science is an obstacle. I'm a scientist. I like science, but I mean, my goodness gracious, I mean, the arrogance of scientists who will not refute the fact that mice and rats, should be, who wouldn't argue that mice and rats are animals, and they're to blame. They're to blame for the perpetuation of violence towards animals in a lot of sorts of research, because they should just be talking to people at NIH and talking to people who do the Animal Welfare Act and say, I mean, how could you do this? But of course, it's also driven by big money. So scientists who do that research are guilty for it. And a lot of it stems from this principle people call human exceptionalism. It's this anthropocentric arrogance that we are separate from and above other animals. And I've talked to people who go, oh, no, no, no. And I'm going, well, really? I mean, look how you spend your day torturing mice and rats and chimpanzees. I mean, if that's not anthropocentric, the animals aren't getting anything out of it. I mean, the truck driver caring for that chimpanzee is clearly, he's doing it from his heart, but that's not, and it's changing his attitude. And I think people, when I say people like him, I don't mean truck drivers, but people like him who get converted by having close interactions with non-human animals are really one of the mechanisms, to me, for future hope. So stop all the human exceptionalism. The other would be, because I work on dogs and I write a lot about dogs, I try to bring it home. So when people are talking about different things that are done to animals, including eating animals, I used to get criticized because I would go to China a lot and work with animals, Asia, working with moon bears who were rescued from the bear bile industry. And they'd say, how can you go to China? That's where they eat dogs and cats. And I would say, oh, I just left Colorado where they eat pigs and cows. And it gets really quiet, really fast. And so I think what's really important, I bring it home because I study dogs, and I say, would you do it to your dog, or would you allow something, egregious to be done to your dog? Would you be passive about it? Oh, no. And I'll go, well, dogs are mammals, humans are mammals, cows are mammals, sheep are mammals. And then we also know about the emotional lives of birds and fishes and other animals. And if I just present it in a nice way, sort of, trying to follow those 13 Ps that I introduced before, you just get people thinking. So why are you upset that I go to China where they eat dogs and cats, where not everyone does that, by the way, and here you are, in the society, and maybe you do the same. I call it babe lettuce and tomato sandwiches, because that's what they are. I mean, let's face it, Babe was a pig. So I just think bringing it home is really important to people who live with a wide variety of sentient companion animals. And I don't push them. If they'll go, oh no, I never would let my dog go to a factory farm. Okay, why? But you don't have to tell me, just sleep on it if you can sleep that night. And the other, what gives me hope, I mean, sessions like this give me hope. I have a firm policy that I don't look at films of abuse anymore. When people ask me to watch them, I'll just say, I can't watch them, but you can write something up that I can edit, because I'm sure that what I'm watching would be just horrific. But also working with kids. I just think getting engaged with kids, I'm astounded by the emails I get from grade schoolers. I was working with four fourth grade girls, one of whom wanted to close down zoos, and she had a very supportive teacher. She was reading stuff that I write. And I'm thinking, in fourth grade, I was probably reading, I don't even know what I was reading, comics. But also working, with older kids, middle school and high school, who have read amazing amounts of literature and who are passionate. the education system hasn't yet quite burned them out. And I really mean that. So my hope lies with having sessions like this. I mean, I mean, you can't even put a number, if you wanted to, on the amount of information that was covered tonight and how wealthy and how important it was. And just getting kids to, it's okay to care. It's okay to ask hard questions. So I think that's that's actually a rough summary of the entire book. And I can't even tell you how many times Jane and I had conversations like this. I'd have to say, we can't do this anymore. I mean, in a joking way. So thank you all for focusing on the book, and thank you all for your splendid presentations. They were riveting. Thank you.
Yeah, they definitely are. Well, thank you for kind of giving us that structure in a way from the book, which is very, very exciting. So we're going to dive in here into some of the roundtable questions, and I'd like to pose the first one. Mark, I know you addressed it with the obstacles, so maybe Allison, if you might want to share, what do you think are some of the obstacles for people that are in opening our minds in humility to animals?
As I said, I think one of the biggest obstacle is people have a disconnect, and I am not absolutely sure, aside from just continuing to chip away at it. And I agree with Mark that children are absolutely key. And if you reach a child in school, they're going to bring the message home to the parents, and hopefully the parents will be receptive. So it does, keep growing. I think, what gives me, sorry, this is not, well, the obstacle too is, for me, how to get my film out there. But not everybody, unfortunately, not everybody can go to a sanctuary, because I know I've heard that people who are inspired to become vegan or vegetarian even, it's usually either by meeting an animal in person and having an epiphany that I would never want to do harm to that animal, or seeing a film, whether it's a graphic film, which I can't watch either, Mark, or a different kind of film, even that bacon film. But those really change people's hearts. So not everybody can go to a sanctuary. So I'm sorry, I don't have the answers, but one thing that really one thing that gives me hope is that I think we are getting to a tipping point. And they do talk about, Mark probably knows scientifically what that is, but I think we're going to start picking up momentum. And just the fact that you can go into the grocery store and there are just so many alternatives.
Yeah.
What's the tipping point, Mark? Do you know that theory that it's like some percentage and then it just goes?
It's almost like the straw falling on the camel's back.
Yeah.
I agree totally with what you're saying. I mean, getting the information out there is critical to a broad audience.
Yeah.
And having firsthand interactions, which, once again, that's where I go back to the importance of companion animals. I had a family in town who would rescue guinea pigs, and they had dogs, and they treated the guinea pigs as if they were dogs. And I don't mean that in a speciesist way, but a lot of people they call them, quote, pocket pets. And they think, oh, these animals are so small, they don't need anything. But I saw changes in them. But putting it out there. I mean, the vision, I actually, and some of my colleagues get upset when I say this, but I kind of think the visual cues and what you're doing are more powerful sometimes than words. I mean, just watch the gorilla, watch that. You could write a book on the guy and that chimpanzee in Canada, but nobody's going to read 300 pages. So watch 10 minutes of this guy. I mean, so I think visuals are critical, and anyway, I'll stop because there's other people, but visuals are and also what Sarah was talking about, and Shalene is the contact, and just getting people to open up, getting more men to open up. I mean, it's really critical because the movement is, if you want to call it, quote, the movement is so, female biased. I'm not saying that's bad, but we do need more men doing it as well, just as role models for other men, if you will. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much to both of you. I'm curious now, Shalene, would you like to tackle that question of the obstacles to people and opening our minds?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is definitely an area that we've thought about quite a lot as we're all here trying to work towards how do we get people to think differently about farmed animals. And I think one of to me, it comes down to the heart of it is culture. It is the culture that we live in, the culture that we create, the culture that's around us. It's so powerful because there's all sorts of cultures that have shaped themselves to accept harm. Right here in the West, we've shaped the culture to accept harm to farmed animals, but not to dogs and cats. And there are other cultures where dogs and cats are okay to consume, and there's other cultures where killing dolphins as a sport is okay, and or there's cultures where killing and consuming your enemy as cannibalism is accepted too. So I think it's the culture that's around us that's the biggest obstacle. And if we can work on telling a different story and shifting that culture even slowly, even around us, right, and our families and our friends and our community, as we start shifting that culture away, and it's very possible because there are cultures that revere life and that will care about even the smallest insect, and there are cultures that really are expressing positivism. So I think together we have those power to be able to create that narrative, and part of that subculture is also about kind of othering, right? Yeah, we do that to other humans, we do that to other races or other genders or sexuality, and we also do that in species. We think about and like, okay, I understand this, and I understand this individual or this group or this kind of animal. I don't understand that, and we end up kind of creating that other space, and that that also leads to that disconnect. So that's my contributions to some of the obstacles that I see. But yeah, so back to you, Lisa.
Yeah, very powerful, that concept of other or them. Looking at at animals that way it does foster that disconnect. I'm curious about Sarah. What would you like to share in terms of your thoughts on the obstacles to people in opening their hearts and minds in humility to animals and how we perceive and relate to them?
Yeah, I think I'd like to build off of what everyone just said and say that I think one of the biggest obstacles I see is ethical fatigue. And the question of what happens after your heart starts to open, your eyes start to open, you've got some information, and you're in one of those WTF is going on in the world, kind of, when everything opens up. And so I think how we can address that, and of course, I'm going to bring it back to spirituality and meditation and mindfulness and these kind of tools, but what tools can we provide people for dealing with the cognitive dissonance and the shock and the horror of when your eyes open? It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good when it happens, and when you start to notice and you think I'm complicit in this, or oh my God, look what I just did. And so being able to provide people tools, I think that we as a culture, especially people who are interested in the topics we're talking about right now, are very, very good at providing cooking advice, diet advice, let's just say cooking advice, diet advice. I don't think we're good at giving people well-being advice beyond that. And so I think that's one of the things we're trying to do at Compassion Consortium as well, which is, for people who are interested in, who are vegan or vegetarian or animal advocates or concerned about the planet or concerned about animals, that kind of a wide swath there. But how do we fill our well? How do we get together? How do we, through music, through film, through prayer, through meditation, non-denominational, right? Anything goes. But how do we give people tools? And I know, Lisa, with your work in vegan spirituality, very much the same type of thing. So I think that to address the fatigue and the dissonance and the, how do I live like this? How do I live with the knowledge that I just got? And I think once our eyes have been open for a while, we can sometimes forget what it's like for beginners, or what it's like the first couple steps, or what the first Thanksgiving is like when you have changed and your family has not. All of those kind of things. So I think it's wellness and mindfulness tools would be my that's where I'm putting my time.
And those are very good investments for anybody who's just walking this path, because it can be there's aha moments, and then there's the fallout from that aha moment. What do I do now, and how do I interact with people going forward? So very powerful thoughts. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, no, the fatigue thing is really interesting. I get, I'm sure you all do, emails and calls from people who are trying really hard. And I always say that, I kind of use myself as an example just because it's easier to do, but I say I work hard, I play hard, and I rest hard, and you can't do it all. You need to refill the tank. And it's okay to just take time off so you can come back strong. Because you know what it's like when you first start doing something, you just want to do it 24/7, and you just don't quite see the results of a lot of that time and energy you're putting into protecting animals, because in many ways it's an uphill battle. You're swimming against the current. So if you get tired, I always tell people, don't give up, just go do something else. And I really mean it. And just keep your eye on the goal that you're working for, and you'll come back stronger. And I know it sounds so simple, but we're all, I shouldn't say we all are, because I don't know you all that well, but I feel like we're all addicts to making the world better for non-humans. And I wouldn't be surprised someday if people do the neurobiology of it and the neuroimaging and discover, we know that the same tracks in the brain are, same for drug addicts and shopaholics. There's an addiction pathway. And sometimes people will say that to me, and maybe they've said it to you, you're just addicted to it. And I go, I am, but at least I can get away from it. So anyway, that's just it's really on the ground that I tell people that.
Yeah, well, that's so important. That's what happens. We often get into this work from something that we see in our own lives and take action against it. And I can definitely say there was a time where I was probably addicted to rescuing kitties. I definitely rescued lots of kitties on the streets of Philly, and but it definitely opened a world for me that I wouldn't have known otherwise, to meet all those wonderful creatures. So also wanted to just ask a couple of other questions. So there are ways that we as humans take steps, take action steps like we were just talking about. But what about taking steps to let go of our attachment of seeing other species as being here for us? So I'll give one example. I know that often if I was in a circle, maybe a spiritual circle, where people were talking about the message that animal brought me, as if the animal willingly killed itself to bring you this message. That's why the animal died as you drove by. So versus what is happening in that animal's life. Do you see people as having an attachment to seeing as we talked about earlier, others as being here for us? How about maybe, I don't know, Mark or Shaleen? And would you like to take that question?
Say it again.
So the question is, what are some of the ways that we can take steps to let go of our attachment to seeing the other species as being here for us?
I think it's really hard sometimes because a lot of people get dogs who they say they love and they bond with and they're special, blah, 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 and then they treat them like they're just an object. I mean, dog abuse is really high, and leaving a dog at home in a crate for 8 hours or at home alone for 8 hours, 10 hours is abusive. So I think it's hard. And because these people really are, I mean, some of the people I know who do that are really great people, you know, they're great moms and dads and aunts and uncles, and they care about the world. And then they do these things. And I'm going, in a nice way, how could you do that? You know, I mean, and maybe making them aware of that, you know, the dissonance, you know, overcoming the cognitive dissonance, if you will, you know, but I mean, mass media, you know, puts out that we run the world. They just do. I mean, yeah, there's pro-animal magazines and shows like, you know, festivals and, you know, gatherings like this, but we are a tiny, tiny percentage. Just turn on the news, just watch it. And I used to have students in my animal behavior class watch different movies, shows and all that, and check off anthropocentric, not. And I mean, the anthropocentric column, I guarantee you, outweighed the non-anthropocentric column 99 to 1. Wow. So my quick answer to that would be just keep putting it out there. Gatherings, writing for the press, radio, TV, editorials, op-eds, and let the scientists publish their stuff in journals that no one reads but their colleagues with the intent of criticizing them. I mean, that's really, I mean, you know, does science make a difference? Yeah, I think it does. But I mean, in the last week, I've talked to people who know nothing about science and have changed their hearts by reading popular stuff or talking with other people. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. So how about Allison? What do you think about that sort of question about how can we let go of our attachment to seeing other species as being here for us?
Well, I think Shailene brought up a really important point, which is that culture is such a huge part of our lives, and it's almost like I have to flick a switch. You can flick a switch and suddenly become an individual as opposed to part of this bigger culture. And how you get people to realize that and flick that switch, again, I think it's having a personal encounter with an animal, maybe getting to know one of us personally, and or seeing a film or reading a book. And but I think we are up against, culture is big, and I don't want to take us off track, but I would love to hear from Shailene if he's thought, you know, you talked about culture, and I totally agree with you. It's huge. And men, you know, Mark mentioned, you know, men are supposed to be manly, and they don't care about baby pigs or any pigs, and they eat beef. And how that's a big obstacle. Sorry, I brought this back to the obstacles, but that's a big obstacle to overcome. And I don't know how we chip that away and get people to flick the switch and think as individuals instead of this collective whole.
Well, Shailene, it sounds like that's a cue for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you know, what's amazing is how culture is so multifaceted. You know, like you brought up one portion to have like men and the notion of manliness, and, you know, it's like you can only build muscle by eating a lot of protein, and the protein that they have is, you know, whey and meat. And some of it is shifting, right? There is more acceptance in athletes about moving away from whey protein. And now we have these amazing vegan athletes that are creating a different culture and a different message that you can be, very muscular and powerful and strong on a vegan diet. So I think it's a continuation of telling those stories, and continuing to, really shift that, because we're, unfortunately, a lot of our current modern culture is shaped by commerce, by companies, and organizations that are looking to push and sell us different products. So we're fighting this kind of Goliath as we're trying to change this culture slowly, but it's happening. It is happening. I do want to say, I want to point out, at one point in our history, us as humans thought of different races as here for us, and that's how slavery was accepted. That we in Nazi Germany, they thought of different religions as people that were here to serve us, and that changed. And so I think there is hope that we can change that for animals as well. And in some ways, connection and compassion is a muscle that we have to all exercise. And when we have those opportunities to really connect with animals, we get to exercise that. When we have the opportunity to meet with people that are outside of our normal day-to-day and get to know other people and their situation and their life history, we get to exercise those muscles. So I think the more we do that, the more we'll collectively move towards greater solutions.
Just want to say something really fast. I think Allison's film, I don't mean to do a plug here, but her film, The Last Pig, exactly embodies that. You follow the story of this man having a shift in consciousness, and then you follow, there's hardly any speaking in the film. There's some as he's on this journey, and then you're following the pigs, and it's so profound. You feel like you're with them. It's so, and he's having this epiphany. It's so powerful. It sort of embodies what everybody's saying, only we're allowed into his story and into the story of the pigs as well. So even though we can't, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I totally agree. I remember after watching it, Allison put me in touch with the man. And I recommended that film to countless people. And I don't know how many in the end made, tangible, meaningful shifts, but it seemed like it was a large number, and it followed almost like, just watching somebody just going through that transition was it was really powerful for me. That's why I wrote to you, because it was really powerful to me.
He's doing pretty well now, by the way. He has mental health issues, but he's in a really good place right now. So if you want to try to get back in touch with him and do some, yes. It's just, for me, it's like, how do I get more people to see that film? And maybe for Shalene, it's like, how do I get more people to the sanctuary? I don't know. It's but we just have to keep doing as much as we can and learn from one another about new ways to reach and change hearts and minds. I was just thinking, this is just so tiny. It's such a drop in the bucket, but I was saying, how on Facebook people say, for my birthday this year, I'm raising funds for blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, maybe your birthday is a great opportunity to say to all your friends, for my birthday this year, what I want from you is for you not to eat any animal products on my birthday. It's just a weird thought, but at least people would stop and think twice.
It's a great idea, Allison. It's wonderful.
Tiny. It's tiny, but
every step makes a difference. Then people realize, oh, I feel okay after that day. Maybe I'll try another.
Right.
That's a
I
really
think
good
the
idea.
Meatless Mondays, I think
Mhm.
some of those movements have helped, veganuary. I think, they're bite-sized, excuse the pun, steps that people can take.
Yeah.
Yeah, I buy meals for, because I ride my bike a lot of miles, a lot of hours, and I'll buy vegan lunches for everybody after a ride. And somebody will say, "Oh, is it okay? Is it okay if I get, this chicken sandwich?" Nope. I mean, I said you can get it, but I'm not paying.
Paying for it. Excellent.
But and some of them learn, they just learn. I'm not saying they're going to all become vegetarian to vegans, but they learn that they could find good, high quality, non-animal food and feel good. And,
Yes.
and slowly but surely, some of them change, and some of them, to me, just have that aha moment. A woman I ride with a lot. I mean, she wasn't a big carnivore, but one day we were riding and she said, "I'm vegetarian now. What do you think?" And I said, "I love it."
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, you're not going to yell at me?" Because, occasionally I eat an egg or cheese. I said, "No, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm just not going to buy you lunch." but no, I agree with you, Allison. You can just do it. Somebody just wrote me a note yesterday who wants vegan desserts for Thanksgiving. And I can't go to Thanksgiving parties where there's a turkey. I wish I could. I mean, when I say I wish I could, because a lot of my good friends do eat them and I really love these people.
Yeah.
But she said, "Yeah, I just want to go vegan desserts." And I call it whole paycheck, but Whole Foods in bold.
Yes.
Their fruit pies have been and are predominantly vegan.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know this. And somebody who worked there said, "Just go look at them." And I don't know that they make a big deal about it. And I decided not to make a big deal about it because then people might not buy them and they'll come up with those lame excuses. Well, I knew there was something wrong with that pumpkin pie or that cherry pie.
Right.
That's right. They don't have butter. But I said, "Yeah, but you've been eating them for the last decade and you love them."
And you've survived.
And yes, and you've survived. Yeah.
Well, I also wanted to see what Sarah thought about that question.
Mm-hmm.
I want pie. I do. Like, I really want pie right now, Mark. But I think what I was thinking while we were talking is one of the things culturally that I think we've lost is the ability to critically think. And so any of the ways that we're able to help people ask questions rather than to tell them what the answer is, so that the answer arises from within them and comes out, I think is really valuable. I write a weekly column for a wellness magazine. And one of the things I really like to do in there is to talk about something I'm wrestling with and then write in there the questions that I have. From my own perspective of what am I wrestling with and what are my questions, and not give the answer. And then that way, whoever's reading it may be triggered by the same questions and say, "Wow, I never thought about all the insects on my license plate." And, and maybe when I should change the time I'm driving, or, whatever topic it is that I happen to be advocating for that week. But in doing it in a way where we're teaching people beyond just making a diet or a lifestyle or an identification as a certain thing, I'm a this or I'm a that, really being able to question, I'm going to use my fancy clergy words, every damn thing that's going on around us, to look at it and say, where does this align with my heart? Does this feel okay? And if not, can I ask a lot of questions? And can I find a community where it's okay to ask those questions and to say, I'm imperfect and I drive a Jeep. Okay. And I'm trying to get rid of the darn thing and I just haven't yet. So, where can we also as advocates expose the areas we're still working on so that we appear, so that we show our own vulnerability and we lead through that vulnerability, and we don't lead through, I have all the answers. Because the minute you lead with, I have all the answers, you lose your audience. That's what I got, Lisa.
Brilliant.
Yes.
That is it is brilliant because we're all fallible. I mean, I don't even know what that means. We've all done things, we say things that we wish we haven't done, and we shouldn't be militaristic about it. I mean, I really believe you just put it out there and you leave, and people, because sometimes people say, oh, you think you're so, you think you're so perfect because you're vegan or because you don't do this. No, I don't think I'm perfect at all. I made the choice. So thank you for that, Sarah. That's really important.
Yes, and for our final question in this roundtable, really this one is about hope. What gives you hope when really thinking about the human-animal connection, the relationship there? What gives you hope for the animals? So maybe we could ask, I know, Mark, you might have mentioned a couple of things, either Mark or would you like to share just a final word on hope?
Kids, youngsters.
Ah,
I mean,
beautiful.
but I mean that, working with people of all ages. When I had roots and shoots groups in Boulder, and one morning I worked with kindergartners and centenarians. I went from an elementary school to a assisted living center. So I literally spanned, in the course of 2 hours, 94 years. and I loved it. This one guy and this woman, he was 100, she was around 98, and they were actually making changes, and they had great grandkids in Boulder. And they said, look, we're old, we're not getting around. That's all I can do, or that's all we can do. And I went, that's all you need to do. So, I mean, yeah, everybody can make a difference. That's the bottom line to the 10 trusts too, because that's always Jane's bumper sticker. And I don't mean bumper sticker in a light way. Everybody can make a difference. So these 99 and 100-year-old people were making a difference by talking to their kids and grandkids. And really, I think there was a 3 great grandchild involved somewhere in Boulder. So that would be my ticket for hope, is getting youngsters to do things and to ask hard questions.
Good, like it. How about Allison? What's your hope?
One thing that also gives me hope, my hope is that we can become a compassionate society and stop consuming animals and using them for our own means and purposes. But I think the fact that plant-based food companies are killing it, in the marketplace. Yeah. That is so cool that they're just doing really well. And on top of it, we have so many options, vegan options available to us, and the rest of the world does too. That definitely gives me hope. And that, it's a sound investment to actually invest your money in some of these vegan companies. That's really great. And I think the vegan athlete, that's a really good point that Shalene made, that they're so high profile now. I think there's a lot to be hopeful for. I do have hope. And I think also the climate crisis. Mm-hmm. We have to be more aware. And still the disconnect there really drives me crazy. It's willful disconnect though. The corporations and the oil industry don't want us to make the connection between animal agriculture and climate change. But it's got to be, it's getting more and more accepted as the truth. So that's not that I'm happy about global warming, but I think it's going to help push us in that direction more quickly. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks for your 2 cents, Allison. It's worth much more than that. And how about Shalene?
I think what gives me hope is as humans, we do have the ability to connect with and see the individual. Even though we may not understand a group, we can connect and see an individual. And And the story I want to share is at the sanctuary, we had a church group recently come out, and one of the church members was a rancher, or he grew up on a farm, and he was talking with one of our team members. He said, I can maybe understand the mammals, like I can maybe understand why I shouldn't kill a cow or a pig, but I've been to a factory farm. I've seen chickens by the thousands in the building, and I just don't get it. I can't understand why I can't eat a chicken. And so what we did was we kind of took him down to our bird building, and one of the things that we do at the sanctuary is an enrichment program. One of them is called clicker play, and so with clicker play, we work with our animal residents to give them cognitive, enrichment, but also it works towards more cooperative care, so that they're happy to participate in their health and care. And we had him meet Gracie, a chicken who was rescued from a factory farm. And Gracie came out and showed her individualism. She showed that she loved to interact with human caregivers. She showed that she can play with this little soccer ball and kick it, or she knew the colors green versus purple. And what she loved the most to do is to spin for everyone. And this man was weeping and had to step away and go away from the building. Like he could connect with them as an individual. What he couldn't connect with the thousands in a factory farm, but that individual made all the difference. And that gives me a lot of hope that we as humans can make that happen. We can change, and those connections will get us there.
Such a poignant example. Thank you, Shalene. How about Reverend Sarah?
So I started odd, I'm going to end odd here. I guess that's my adjective. But, one of the things that really gives me hope is animals and other beings doing things on their own, completely separate from us, and remembering that there are lives that we don't see, that down deep, deep, deep in the ocean, there are species that we have not seen and we have not named. And thank God for that. And thank the Force for that too. But that there is life going on. Now we know that a lot of this is threatened, right? And we know that, and that's the background to the hope. But that there is life wanting to live and beings wanting to do what they do without us. Without us, decenter ourselves straight out of that, without us. So that would be the one thing I would say. And the second thing that I do want to just kind of interject here, I am very, very curious as we open our hearts and open our minds, how much we can get curious about how we treat other life, plant life, habitat life, ecosystem life, as we move to a more plant-based, hopefully big shift, right, in how we're eating. How are we treating that life too? And I think that's a question we don't always get into, but it is entangled and it is intertwined, and making sure that we are respecting. We go from factory farming chickens to factory farming and pumping plants full of other things that aren't great for them, for us. That's a big curiosity I have. So I know it's a little outside of our topic tonight, but I do think it's something to keep in mind. If our hearts are open with compassion, how far does that go?
You said something I thought you were going to say, but I always ask, who's for dinner? Who are you wearing? Because words count. It's not what's for dinner. And people go, what do you mean, who's for dinner? In fact, in this book I just published, we have that in there, that non-human animals eat one another, and they eat what and they eat who. And the editors let it go. So that was a little twinge of hope.
Yeah, and it's and the more that we're learning about trees, also really should have us pause again. Back to the critical thinking, should have us pause just a little bit about how we're treating everything. And I think it's Robin Wall Kimmerer who says that when a maple is an it's easy to cut down, but when a maple is a her, it's not so easy to cut down.
Yeah.
So, again, it's a little beyond where we're going today, but I think we have to keep stretching ourselves of clearly we need to eat. Well, there are breatharians, but clearly we need to eat. And how do we also do that respectfully as this shift that we all want to happen so much happens?
Thank you for expanding our mind to new horizons, Reverend Sarah. I just wanted to bring attention as we close out our wonderful program tonight, just that we've had such inspiration from each person in their own unique way to take action for animals. And we have through books, through writing, we've got through the visual of watching films with Allison and also with Shaleen, with the hands-on connection with the animals at the sanctuaries. And also, Reverend Sarah, you've brought in the spiritual element through our liturgy, through our worship practices, and through our connection to spirit in whatever form we believe. So this has been a very well-rounded evening, and I'm just so honored and grateful to be with each of you as we explored the third trust tonight, and also thank Ellie and to everyone who's joining us for the Compassion Arts Festival. This is a really special and unique program that's offered each year, and I encourage everyone to keep watching, keep learning, keep opening your heart even more and more. So with that, it's been my honor to be the host or moderator tonight, and I'll be thinking of all the things that you've shared and keeping it in my awareness for the next few days, I think, as I consider that third trust. So now I'd like to turn it back over to Reverend Sarah, because she has a very special way that she's going to close us out tonight with a super. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about this meditation we're about to do?
Sure. This is, if you remember in the presentation, I talked about animal divina. This is what I call this practice. This is just a few minutes. I think this piece is about 8 minutes long. So those of you who are able to stay and do it, or if you're watching this video, you can return to it if you need to at a different time. But the idea is to kind of turn off our thinking brains, to turn on our ears, to turn on our eyes, and to open our hearts with glimpses into the more than human world. Close your eyes gently and open your ears. And now if your eyes are closed, take a deep breath and breathe them open. Feel the air expand in your lungs, the air that we share with other beings like this one. Notice the distinction when you can see and not hear their world. Each being in their own habitat, with their own purpose, their own wants and needs and desires. Each being with curiosity, with families, take a deep breath. This life is going on all around you, all the time, for each one of these beings. Take another deep breath, and don't miss this rambunctious little one. Oop, there he goes. What is it like to see into worlds we don't normally see into? To connect to beings we don't normally connect to? How does this feel in our bodies? What thoughts arise in our minds? What are we curious about? What is he eating? Where are they going? Notice your breath, the breath that you share with these beings, the life force that goes in and out of our bodies. Ask yourself, who might I want to know more about? What action might I take to help these other beings? Take another deep breath and leave this meditation with this question. How can you connect more deeply with the more than human world? How can you help others who aren't able to go to the spaces we just visited in person? See the beauty there and the beings there. And now take a stretch. Make sure you're in your body. Return your focus to feeling the space around you. What does it feel like? Do you notice any distinction, any change, any thought come up that you want to scribble? Okay, Lisa, back to you.
I'm just going to say a quick word and thank everybody so much for this evening and for your amazing work. It was a beautiful meditation and your power of example. And that's all I have to say. And thank you to all the animals that have changed our lives and brought us on the path we're walking. Lisa, I'll let you close.
Thank you, Ellie, and thank you, Sarah, for that beautiful meditation. Thanks to everyone. May you have a harmonious evening and keep the animals in your heart, in your mind, and in your spirit. Good night, everyone.